This is the pre-trip for the Class A construction driving in Washington State 2022. I will now perform my air leak test. I will watch the air pressure gauge to see that the air pressure drops no more than 3 psi in 1 minute for a single vehicle, or no more than 4 psi in 1 minute for a combination vehicle. This is a combination vehicle. This combination vehicle did not lose more than 4 psi in 1 minute. I will now perform my low air warning test. The low air warning devices must activate at 55 psi or above. The low air warning activated at 55 psi. The parking brake and tractor protection valves must activate in a range of 40 to 20 psi. My tractor protection and parking brake valves have activated at 20 psi. Make sure both valves have popped out. I will depress the clutch and make sure gear shift is in neutral, start the engine and release the clutch slowly for my safety start. Checking that the DEF warning light illuminates when the engine starts and it turns off. And the anti-lock braking system, the ABS indicator light, illuminates and turns off. I will check that my seatbelt is securely mounted. It latches, it adjusts properly, and is not frayed or ripped. I will check that I have my 3 reflective triangles in the red box. This truck uses breakers, but if it uses fuses, I would check for spares. I have my securely mounted, properly charged, and 5 BC rated fire extinguisher. It's fully charged when the gauge needle is in the green. I will check my gauges. My temperature gauge is working. The temperature gauge is beginning to climb in a normal operating range, and the warning light is off. My DEF gauge has at least 1/8 DEF fluid in the tank. My oil gauge shows that the pressure is working and shows increasing or normal oil pressure, and the warning light has gone off. My voltmeter gauge shows that the alternator is charging and the warning light is off. My air supply gauges are working properly, and I will listen for the air governor to cut out. I will activate my high beam. My left and right turn signal indicator lights are working, and my hazard lights are working. I will check that the heater and defroster fan is working properly. I will demonstrate that both my air and electric horns are working properly. I will demonstrate that the wiper arms and blades are secure, they're not damaged, they operate smoothly, and the windshield washers operate properly. The windshield mirrors are clean and securely mounted, and there are no illegal stickers, obstructions, or damage to the glass. I will perform the brake checks on the tractor parking brake, the trailer parking brake, and the service parking brake, or the service brake. The lights, reflectors, reflective tape, and lenses are clean, securely mounted, and not missing or broken. They are the proper color for their location, which is amber. There are no fresh puddles underneath from fluid leaks, and the vehicle is not leaning to one side. In the engine compartment, I'll begin with checking the exhaust system. It is securely mounted, tightly connected, and free from damage. There are no loose or missing nuts, bolts, clamps, or mounting brackets. There are no signs of exhaust leaks such as rust or carbon soot. I will continue my engine compartment check by checking the hoses and clamps, looking for cuts, cracks, bulges, or abrasive damage from rubbing against other parts, and all clamps appear tight and are not damaged. I will check the coolant level in the overflow reservoir. The coolant is within safe operating range. If no other means were available and the engine had not recently been running, I would remove the radiator cap and look with my eyes, visibly check for the coolant level. On this side of the vehicle, the water pump is present. The water pump is belt driven. The water pump is operating properly. It's securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and it's not damaged or leaking. I will go to the other side of the engine compartment and check that my belts are not cracked, frayed, or showing signs of loose fibers or wear. They do not deflect more than 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch from the center of the belt. I will check that the alternator is securely mounted with no loose, missing nuts or bolts. There are no loose electrical connections, exposed or burned wiring. It is functioning properly and not damaged. The alternator is belt driven. I will check the oil level using the dipstick. The oil level is within the safe operating range, which is above the fill mark. Our air compressor is gear driven. It is securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts. It is operating properly, has no fluid or air leaks, and it is not damaged. We will check the power steering pump, which is gear driven. The fluid is above the fill mark and in the safe operating range. It is securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and it's not damaged or leaking. From the power steering, I will check that the steering box and hoses are securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts. There are no leaks. The hoses show no signs of cuts, cracks, bulges, or abrasive damage. The steering linkage, connecting links, arms, and rods are not excessively worn or cracked. The joints and sockets are not worn or loose, and there are no missing nuts, bolts, or cotter pins. We will check the springs. The leaf springs are not missing, shifted, cracked, bent, or broken. The shock absorbers are securely mounted, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and they are not leaking. The mounts and U-bolts, the spring mounts, U-bolts, and hangers are securely mounted, not missing, cracked, or broken, no missing or damaged bushings, nuts, or bolts. Continued in the steering axle, we're going to check for our disc brakes. The brake hoses, the air supplying brake hoses are securely mounted. They're not leaking, cracked, worn, bulging, frayed, or showing signs of abrasive damage. The brake chamber is securely mounted to the rotor. No loose or missing nuts, bolts, clamps, or hardware. No other damage or leaks. The brake rotors, there are no cracks, grooves, holes, or oil or grease, and the rotor wear indicators are present. Brake pads, the brake wear indicators are not lined up, and the guide pin caps are in place. We will check the tires in the front axle. The steering axle tires must have a minimum tread depth of 4/32 of an inch in all major grooves. All others must be at least 2/32. The tread is evenly worn with no signs of tread separation. There are no cuts, bumps, abrasions, or other damage to the tread or side walls. The valve stem and cap are not missing, damaged, or broken. And I would check for proper tire inflation using a tire gauge. The rims and wheels have no dents or damage, no visible cracks or welding repairs. Lug nuts, there are no signs of loose or missing lug nuts, such as rust trails or shiny threads. No cracks or distortion radiating from the lug holes. The hub oil and axle seals are not leaking. If the axle has a sight glass or removable seal, I would check the oil level. The driver door fuel area, we'll check that the cab steps are properly mounted and free of debris. The doors are not damaged, they open and close properly. The hinges and latches are secure with the seals intact. The mirrors, mirror brackets are securely mounted, not damaged. They have no loose fittings or missing parts. They are adjusted properly and free from excessive dirt. Our fuel and DEF tanks are securely mounted with no missing nuts, bolts, or mounting parts. The caps are tight. There are no leaks. The side of the equipment, the reflective tape, clearance lights, and reflectors are clean, not missing or broken. They are securely affixed to the vehicle, and they are the appropriate color for their location. Under the vehicle, we will check that the frame of the tractor, that there are no cracks, holes, broken welds, missing pieces, or other damage in the longitudinal frame members or cross members. The catwalk and steps are solid, free of debris, and mounted securely to the tractor frame. The drive shaft and U-bolts are not cracked, bent, broken, or twisted, and they are free from foreign objects, securely mounted with no loose or missing U-bolts or nuts. We will check for our coupling devices. The tractor coupling devices, the air supplying hoses, fittings, and electrical cord are not cut, spliced, cracked, chafed, taped, excessively worn, or leaking. They are not crimped, pinched, tangled, or dragging against tractor parts. The glad hands and electrical plugs are firmly seated and locked in place. We'll check our fifth wheel system, the apron. The apron is properly mounted and secure. It is not cracked, bent, or broken. The skid plate and gap. The skid plate is properly mounted and secure. It is not cracked, bent, or broken. It is properly lubed, and there is no gap in between it and the apron. I will continue checking the fifth wheel system by checking the release handle, safety latch, and kingpin. I will verify the release handle is secure all the way in and that the safety latch is in place. I will too check to see that the locking jaws are fully closed around the shank of the kingpin and that the kingpin is not cracked, bent, or broken by looking in the rear of the fifth wheel. I will continue inspecting the fifth wheel system. I will check the fifth wheel plate, platform base, and sliding assembly for loose or missing mounting bolts, nuts, or pins. They are securely fastened and they are not cracked, bent, or broken. Checking that the sliding fifth wheel locking pins and clearance, there are no loose or missing pins in the slide mechanism. The actuator and air line is not leaking. The slide locking pins are fully engaged. The fifth wheel is positioned properly so that the tractor frame and mud flaps will clear the landing gear during turns. I will check the rear of the tractor. The mud flaps are not rubbing, worn, or torn. They hang down to at least the center of the axle, and they are securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts. Lights and reflectors are clean, securely mounted, not missing or broken. They are the proper color of red for their location, and our license plate is present, clean, and secure. I will check the drive axle rear suspension, the suspension mounts. There are no loose, cracked, broken, missing, shifted, or damaged attachments, hangers, U-bolts, torque arms, shocks, or other parts. The airbags lines and valves have no cuts, abrasions, or bulges, and the airbag system is not deflated or leaking. We will check the disc brakes. The air supplying brake hoses are securely mounted, not leaking, cracked, worn, bulging, frayed, or showing signs of abrasive damage. The brake chamber is securely mounted to the rotor. No loose or missing nuts, bolts, clamps, or hardware. No other damage or leaks. There are no cracks, grooves, holes, oil, or grease to the rotors. The rotor wear indicators are present. The brake pads, the brake wear indicators are not lined up. Guide pen caps are in place. I will check the rear drive axle. Drive tires must have a minimum tread depth of 2/32 of an inch in all major grooves. Tread is evenly worn with no signs of tread separation. There are no cuts, bumps, abrasions, or other damage to the tread or side walls. The valve stems and caps are not missing, broken, or damaged, and I would check for proper tire inflation by using a tire gauge. The rims and wheels have no dents or damage, no visible cracks or welding repairs, no signs of loose or missing lug nuts, such as rust trails or shiny threads, no cracks or distortion radiating from the lug holes, and the hub oil axle seals are not leaking. If they have a glass sight or a removable seal, I would check the oil level. The wheel spacing of the dual wheels are evenly spaced, not showing signs of damage, and have no debris or foreign objects in between them. We'll start checking the trailer components. The landing gear is fully raised. The crank handle is secure. The assembly has no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and nothing is bent or broken. We'll continue checking the trailer frame. The lights, reflectors, reflective tape, and lenses are clean, securely mounted, not missing or broken. They're the proper color for their location. We will check that the trailer frame cross members, box, and floor have no loose or missing nuts or bolts. Nothing is cracked, bent, or broken. The trailer suspension, we're checking the suspension mounts. There are no cracked, bent, broken, missing, shifted, or damaged springs, hangers, or bushings. The spring attachments are securely mounted with no loose nuts, bolts, or brackets. The torque arms and suspension stabilizing parts are not cracked, bent, or broken. They are securely mounted with no loose, missing nuts or bolts or mounting parts. We will look at the trailer drum brakes. The air supplying brake lines are securely mounted, not leaking air, cracked, worn, bulging, frayed, or showing signs of abrasive damage. The brake chambers are securely mounted. There are no loose or missing nuts or bolts, no cracks, dents, or loose or missing clamps, and they are not leaking. Slack adjusters are securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts. They are not cracked, bent, or broken. Have no loose or missing parts. The brake push rod should not move more than 1 inch when pulled by hand. I will continue to check that there are no cracks, grooves, or holes, and no signs of oil or grease on the brake drums. The brake lining is at least 1/4 inch thick. It is not cracked or broken, and there are no signs of oil or grease on the linings. We will check the trailer axle. The trailer tires must have a minimum tread depth of 2/32 of an inch in all major grooves. The tread is evenly worn with no signs of tread separation. There are no cuts, bumps, abrasions, or other damage to the tread or the side walls. The valve stems and caps are not missing, broken, or damaged, and I would check for the proper tire inflation using a tire gauge. Our rims and wheels have no dents or damage, no visible cracks or welding repairs. No signs of loose or missing lug nuts, such as rust trails or shiny threads, no cracks or distortion radiating from the lug holes. The hub oil and axle seals are not leaking. If it has a sight glass or removable seal, I would check the oil level. The duals are evenly spaced, not showing signs of damage, and have no debris or foreign objects in between them. The rear of the trailer. The mud flaps are not excessively worn or torn. They hang down to at least the center of the axle and are securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts. Lights and reflectors, reflective tape, and lenses are clean, securely mounted, not missing or broken. They're the proper color of red for their location, and our license plate is present, clean, and secure. I would check the remainder of the vehicle the same as I had on the driver's side.